This is a meeting of the Ways and Means Committee. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that the press and the public were duly notified of the meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. Nicole, you want to do roll?
Sure. Councilmember Miller.
Here.
Councilmember Pierce.
Here.
Councilmember Cohen.
Here.
Councilmember Myers.
Here.
Councilmember Streetman.
Here.
Councilmember Ward.
Here.
Councilmember Carroll. Mayor Pounds. Councilmember Goshen.
Here.
You have a quorum?
First item is citizens' comments. No citizens' comments. Next item is the special presentations. We have Chris Creed from Full Holson for a discussion of the minimum healthy beach.
And I think Chris is somewhere on a boat, I think, and may be unable to attend. So we have Zach here with Foth Olson,
Evening, everyone.
and he's going to join us.
Hey, Zach.
Hey, can y'all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you all for having me. Again, I'm stepping in for Chris this evening, but I have been working closely with him since the start of my career here at Foth Olson about 9 years ago. I've been extensively involved with the Hilton Head project and am on the team that is performing the beach alternatives analysis for the city. So I'm going to go ahead and give you just a brief update about where we stand with all our alternatives analysis, as well as go through some of the discussion that we had last week with the beach committee about the minimum beach condition, as we understand it, that the council will be taking that back up. So we wanted to go ahead and provide you this information too, as hopefully it helps with some of the decision making down the road. So I will go ahead and share my screen real quick, and I believe you already have this presentation in your packet, so you can follow along there or hopefully see it on the screen as well. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. So to kick this off, I wanted to just go through first where we stand with our current work for you with the alternatives analysis, and then I'll get into more of what this presentation was put forward regarding the minimum healthy beach discussion. But in regards to the alternatives analysis, so we have been working on reviewing previous reports that the city has had done before. We've been going through old meeting minutes and prior discussions that the city has had, and are also deep in the process of analyzing historical survey data that Douglas Sean and Stephen Trainum with CSA have been helping pass along to us to help fill in this history about what previous efforts have been performed for the city. We've also had a few productive meetings with the Army Corps of Engineers, the Charleston District, as well as members from the state of South Carolina DES. So we've had some high-level meetings with them so far to discuss the options about the and the opinions for the alternatives analysis to gauge kind of the idea of how the regulatory agencies would interpret some of these actions and run these by them to kind of get the preliminary buy-in about what types of alternatives are feasible for the city of Isle Palms and what that would mean for the future. So we've had some productive meetings with them and look to have some more in the future as the analysis progresses. And then lastly, we'll talk a little bit more about the minimum healthy beach condition the remainder of this presentation. But as of now, we have all the information that we need to continue our analysis, and I'll build a little bit more upon that as we go through this. So I can take any questions now, or if it'd be easier just to wait to hold on to the end because I've only got limited time.
Just a quick question. When do you expect to have this initial work completed, that you can come back to council with some recommendations?
Sure. Yeah. So we've talked with Douglas and Sean, and we're going to be aiming to get the initial results of the analysis to the beach committee meeting in the beginning of July, their first meeting then, and would look to go from there to setting up with, I guess, a follow-up meeting with the council. So that's kind of our schedule right now for delivery of the initial results. And would look to have a draft memo put together of the report in the August timeframe. Okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead and move on. So the So to get into the discussion about the minimum healthy beach condition, and as far as Chris and I are aware, some of this information from our monitoring reports that we do for the town of Hilton Head Island every year have been passed around, and maybe they've made their way to you as well. So we wanted to go through and just provide some additional context in the event that you were working on reading some of these and understanding kind of what the history of what we've done there is and how it might apply to the city of Isle of Palms. So what you're looking at here in this graph is a lot going on, but it's kind of broken down and compartmentalized into different parts that we're looking at to kind of gauge the health of the beach more or less. And so what the town of Hilton Head has done for the past 30 plus years is they have semi-annual monitoring surveys done. They do one in the springtime and one in the wintertime, so that way they get an idea of what their beach looks like. And so we help them by analyzing this data and boiling it down into different components. And so looking at the top here, we've got a few, you see these red bars at the top, and you can see it says in reference to the town's beach line where the beach width is less than 200 feet. These are areas of the island that we consider, quote, narrow because they're under 200 feet. And so I'm going to share a little bit more about the beach line in a second about what that's in reference to. But this is just one of the parts that we look at when evaluating the health of the beach. So in addition to those areas that are narrow, which would be the distance between the town's beach line and the mean high water line, we also look at things such as the let me see my cursor there. The third graph down here is the mean high water level change. And so the period that we're looking at here is from June 2018 to April 2025, which was the whole period between the previous nourishment project and the one that they're just finishing up this month there, that some of you may have had the opportunity to see. And so we're tracking things about how the beach is behaving in different areas along the island from both a shoreline position standpoint and then also on the bottom graph here, a total volume perspective. So when you put these different parts together, you kind of get a better idea of how the beach is performing, both as a whole and then different components of it. In the case of like looking at the mean high water level. So moving on, I want to touch a little bit on what the beach line means, and so that was what I was showing you a second ago, was in reference to that 200-foot kind of metric that we use. So the town's beach line was established back in 2006, and it was based on the location of the Office of Coastal Resource Management, so OCRM, which is now the South Carolina DES, the 1999 position baseline, and that was the location of the primary dune along Hilton Head Island at that time. And so what the town ended up doing at this point was in the history of their beach management, so they had their first project in 1990, and that was when they had reestablished conditions along most of the Atlantic-facing part of the shoreline. And in 1997, they had another nourishment project, so it was the first re-nourishment of the island's beaches. And so what the town elected to do at that point was, because once they began their nourishment program, it was adding more beach to all throughout the island. And so when you have that happening, there's more land out in front of people's properties, and all of a sudden you start seeing people like, oh, well, there's more land there, and maybe we can capitalize on that and develop further seaward. Well, the town didn't want to do that, and they wanted to limit the amount of seaward advance of structural development, because if once they started doing that, it could become the town's responsibility to ensure that those structures that would be progressively built further and further seaward are properly protected. And so the town elected to say, hey, we're going to stop it at where the location of the 1999 OCRM baseline was, and that's going to be the maximum build location for them. And so since then, that's what they've held as the furthest seaward part that development can go to. So that's a point in space. So to talk about in another light, so we have the beach line, and that's more or less like a physical location. there's a recommended minimum beach condition that we also look at in this analysis of kind of beach health along Hilton Head. And so the recommended minimum beach condition is a profile shape. So it's more of a shape of the beach, and how that plays into the town's management is that, again, going back to the history of the projects, the 1990 project being initial restoration and the 1997 project being the first renourishment of that project, the town elected to use, I think it was April 1997, survey of the beach to characterize what a recommended minimum beach condition would be at different points along the island. And so this has a physical shape to it. So what you're looking at here is a cross section of a beach, and on the left side is the upland. And we've drawn this so that it goes back to represent kind of the conditions that existed before beach nourishment happened on Hilton Head Island. And this gray area is what used to be, well, still is, a buried revetment out there. They went out to the Coligny Beach area. It's kind of the central portion of the island. There wasn't a beach in many cases, even during high tide out here. And so after reestablishing conditions along the island from their first two projects, it's pushed the beach out to beyond what you're seeing here as the pink or magenta line. And that is, again, the 1997 recommended minimum beach condition. And so this forms more of the cross-sectional shape of what they are trying to protect. They've established it as, hey, we don't want our beach to go more landward than the 1997 condition. And we're going to make sure that we maintain the beach in a position seaward of that in the efforts that it will never get back to be more eroded than in April 1997. So the other lines you're looking on here are a few cross sections that we have from various points in time, such as before the 2016 project, which was the most recent nourishment before the one that we're finishing this week. And then also at that point in time of this, one of these cross sections was the April 2022 survey. So this forms, again, more or less the cross-sectional shape of what the beach you would want to have, or what Hilton Head has as their minimum condition that they want to make sure that they maintain at all times out there. So we looked at this, for how this might apply to Isle of Palms, and just going from left to right here, we've got the reaches 1 through 7, going from Breach Inlet to Dewey's Inlet. And we started looking at kind of two positions, and this is more or less an idea of what might be kind of what would the baseline be for management along the Isle of Palms. And what you're looking at here, the black line represents a rough estimate of the seaward extent property, of upland infrastructure, and that might be, in some cases, a pool boundary, like if a pool is built out there. It could be the seaward extent of a building, kind of whatever structure might exist at the most seaward portion along each of these parcels. And then also we have the 2017 DES baseline in red there, and you can see that there's a difference between the two of those, which could mean a difference for how these areas are managed depending on which one you choose to use for your management efforts. So I wanted to scroll a little bit down the island. So starting here through Reach 1, going to Reach 2, and you can see that the red line and black line, they kind of wiggle back and forth with each other. In most cases for the Reach 1 and Reach 2, red lines is more seaward than the upland structure area, the black line. But then you start getting into Reach 3, where there's an offset of the structures, and they go, even though the parcels extend out to the beach, you have the structure boundary, which is way back in the beach here. So from looking at trying to develop something like a minimum distance that might be desired to be maintained, it can't be necessarily looked at from a single value from this standpoint, because you have just inherent offsets for the locations of different properties along the city's shoreline. So this is kind of just to bring to light that when approaching the minimum healthy beach that the city might desire, there'll need to be some considerations for these differences in the locations of property at various points along the island. So we keep on moving down here, or up here, shall I say, to the north. The reaches 4 to 5. And you can see at some point, even the structure line goes more seaward than the DES line. So again, this kind of reinforces that when looking at the two, or when looking at developing a minimum condition, that considerations need to be made for the various locations of infrastructure along the shoreline. And you start turning up here to Dewey's Inlet, and you get this kind of weird thing going on here where you got parts of it where the structure line is more seaward than the DES baseline and vice versa. So I hope that kind of just provides a little bit more context about that when approaching the minimum beach discussion. There will need to be some flexibility, we believe, in how this is used along the island's shoreline, because you have just various amounts of conditions throughout the whole beach. So we dug into some of the previous work that was done by CSE to kind of more familiarize ourselves with those efforts. And this is a cross-sectional plot of our understanding of what a quote minimum beach condition might be from the perspective of looking at it in a volumetric standpoint. And so roughly 380 cubic yards per foot had been previously identified for how much sand might need to be in a system in order to maintain what might be a healthy beach. And this was, and our understanding of this is the boundaries that were used to develop this. And again, we're looking at a cross section of the beach here. So we've got upland on the left and sea on the right. And the boundaries between this were approximately the edge of structure out to where the beach profile intersected at the minus 13 foot contour. And so that's more or less how far it would take to get to this 300 cubic yards a foot. So there could be some potential drawbacks to this, is what we found, depending on where you look at different parts of the island, because this profile view of it at 380 cubic yards a foot could be distributed in different parts of the beach. That might be up here in the dune. It could be down here below the waterline. It doesn't quite give you the full view of where that volume is located. So we've been going through the historical profile data and looking at the different reaches just in a general view of a few of them. So we've showed them here. This is a cross section of Reach 1, so down by Breach Inlet. And what I'm showing on here, and you can see a few of the historical profiles here in the middle of the screen. On the left side, there's a vertical line where we've approximated the landward extent of a volume computation. And then the green line on the bottom here is that minus 13 foot contour that I alluded to a second ago, of where the 380 cubic yards a foot was being computed to. So one of the issues you can quickly see here is that these profiles, they never actually reached down to the minus 13 foot contour for where this profile was taken. And at that point, I mean, you're already looking to be 800 feet, 800 feet from the beach, and aren't even seeing not even close to the minus 13 foot contour. But it could be that you reach that 380 cubic yards a foot pretty quickly. So it's not necessarily, in the way that we're viewing it, might not be indicative of just how well the sand volume is situated on the landward part of the beach. That is, the part of the beach that most people see, on the day-to-day. That's where you enter it from and are most familiar with. So it's kind of hard to really appreciate how much of a beach you have looking at it in this perspective. So moving along, there's a red was a mean high water line. This is another profile as we're going up the island's beaches. If this is in Reach 2, I think it's kind of around the pier area. And you can quickly see that there's a different profile shape up here now that we're getting away from Breach Inlet. And again, vertical line on the left for the landward limit of volume. the minus 13-foot contour there on the bottom, the green area. And this one profile shows that where you get a lot closer to that minus 13 foot. And you can see up here that in this area it has a dune. So more of the volume is being captured in the upper part of the beach than the lower part of the beach. So you already see here there's a various type of conditions that this 380 cubic yards a foot could be represented as in different parts of the beach depending on where you're looking. A few other lines I wanted to show on here, just in concept, is the orange line here. This could be taken akin to, like at Hilton Head, I was talking about the recommended minimum beach condition. What that would represent is more or less the position that the minimum beach would want to be maintained at all times. This would be the baseline condition. And then beyond that, the green line here could be something like the amount of sand that the city would wish to have seaward of that to provide additional sacrificial sand to. So when storms come through, the times between renourishment projects, this is the additional sand that exists beyond the minimum level of beach that the city might be interested in ensuring stays out there on the beach. And just a few more profiles. Similarly, you can see that as we're going from south to north up the beach, this is reach 4 now. Still not quite reaching the minus 13-foot contour, but once we get up to reach 5, start seeing another interesting phenomenon here. This is where some of the offshore shoals tend to make their way onto the beach. And if you look at trying to account for that 380 cubic yards a foot out to the minus 13-foot contour, here again, it's not reached, but you see these large masses of sand that are those offshore shoals that are making their way onshore that are being captured in the computation. And so, you know, the sand tends to be making its way onshore, but when you're talking about the actual health of the beach that you're a subaerial beach, or the part of the beach that people walk on and recreate on, it's not really representative of the necessary health of the beach in that area of it. So even though this area might have 380 cubic yards a foot, you're not necessarily seeing all of it on the beach side of it. Some of it is still making its way onshore from offshore. And just another profile up here, reach 6. And we had looked through a few of the old reports that were shared with us from CSE, and there was a graphic that had been come up with and a relationship between the amount of volume that is in each of these profiles and a measure of how far the mean high water line is from upland development. And so they had come up with a relationship between how much sand is in the system to a cross-shore distance between the structure and mean high water. So we've been looking at that as well, and there appears to be generally a close relationship between 380 cubic yards a foot and roughly 180 to 200 feet of beach between the upland development and the mean high water line. So where does that lead this discussion? So for the purposes to go back to our work, we spent a decent amount of time working on this, that is understanding the minimum beach work that was done previously, because we felt that it was important for our understanding and for the development of us providing recommendations to the city based on what type of minimum condition the city would be interested in maintaining out there. And so because it appears that this is a conversation that does continue to warrant just further discussion, the way that we're going to approach this in our report is to look at the range of conditions between, you know, some amount of feet land or seaward of the upland development. That way that we have an idea of, you know, what the range and scale of these recommendations should be for the different alternatives, that being beach nourishment, a no action alternative, looking at various types of structures and combinations thereof. And as the anticipated continued discussion of the minimum beach goes on, we can always look to update these numbers based on those future discussions that we hope will occur. But for the meantime, we'll look at a specific range that we'll develop for the report. That way we can continue with our work for the city. Yep, so that kind of goes through kind of where we stand with our alternatives analysis. So we'll include looking at different costs associated with each of those alternatives and opinions. And as I touched on, we'll look to produce these preliminary findings at the Beach Committee's initial July meeting. All right. Got through everything you need to. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And glad to take any questions that you might have, or I can take some notes and always get back to you soon. Thank you.
Yeah, on your first bullet point of that last slide, it says establish a study baseline. And so your firm's going to recommend this feet seaward of development to the dune crest? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we will look at developing, and more or less as the discussion of the minimum beach is still going on and there isn't a specific number set yet, we'll look at producing more or less a range. That way you have something for comparison's sake.
So this says, though, from seaward of development, so that's from either a pool or a home, I assume you're talking about, to the dune
Oh,
crest.
okay, yes.
To the
Yeah,
dune
so there would
crest.
be,
That's not to
correct.
the length of the beach, though, that's just to where the dune is.
Correct. Yeah, I should have added a little bit extra on that. So there would be, in two parts, there would be a recommended amount of feet seaward of the upland development between the development and a dune crest. So in some places around the island, a dune crest might not exist right now, which hopefully in the city's long-term beach management would allow for the eventual construction of a dune to be established throughout the island. And then from that point seawards, so from the dune crest, would also look from there to the mean high water to produce that distance between the dune crest and the recreational beach. So it's more or less like two-part to it.
All right. And it doesn't the dune crest, by state law, say it's at the baseline?
I would need to double check on that, but I do think that the OCRM has historically set their baselines on the crest of the primary dune.
For areas outside of the inlet,
Inlet
that is
zones,
true,
yeah.
yeah. So I think it starts that way at Sixth Avenue, and but from Sixth South, it's where the water is, where
Right.
some different metric.
Then it's a historical high tide, mean high tide line in the inlet zones.
Not for the dune.
Well, that's where their jurisdiction line
Yeah,
starts.
well, I'm talking about where the dune is.
Well, the assumption is that your high tide is going to launch to the edge of your dune, and they're one and the same.
Seems like a bad assumption.
Zach, when you mention a dune crest and hopefully a dune crest being all up and down the island, so you're suggesting that maybe one of the recommendations is going to be to build a dune where we have one, where we don't have one now, but we have a very wide beach nonetheless, a very dry beach, even in high tide.
Yes, that could become one of the recommendations.
Zach, this is Scott. When I was watching you go through each of the reaches, it also comes to mind that because of where our structures are located and the amount or volume of beach that we have on this 380 cubic yards per foot, a lot of our beach may not require any volume because the structures are set back so far. But this clearly is not a one size fits all when we're making our assumptions.
That's right.
Every
Yeah.
reach is going to be somewhat unique, or every area is going to be pretty unique within those reaches. And,
Yes. Yeah, and it's very, clearly Reach 3, for example, is a great example of that.
And when you talked about that, I mean, the one that I think really stood out on the 380 cubic yards per foot of not being a healthy beach is where we have the shoal. I mean, if for recreation purposes, you've got the basic channel going through, so a lot of that volume can be beyond where the dry beach is. Is that's kind of
That's right.
What it looked like to me. Okay.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit more on that too, for just to go reference back to the Hilton Head case as well. We look at different metrics too. It's not just location of mean high water. It could be the location of +5, for instance. That's a good representative location of the dune at Hilton Head. You can look at different elevations to give you a better idea of where the sand is distributed in the system. So it's not a one size fits all, but it can be tailored and looked at different ways depending on what the characteristics of the beach are.
Yes, one more question. When I looked at your timeline too, and you were showing the 97, or I think it was 90, 97, 2016, 2018, 2022, it also sounds like Hilton Head did not achieve the goals in one shot. It took multiple cycles to get all of their dune and volume to the target.
Yes.
Not just.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the major restoration, initial major restoration happened in 1990. I think it was along more or less the most Atlantic portion of the island. And then 1997 was the follow-up project to that, make the first renourishment, if you will. And they added some additional reaches at that point. And kind of with each progressive project from then on, they would renourish the same reach to build it back to its initial the initial project conditions, and then also continually address other locations along the island over time as well. So it is a long-term plan.
Do you have the amount of sand that we're going to renourish the beach with here starting very soon on each of the reaches? And if so,
Do you mean for the?
can you
Sorry, go ahead.
can you do a profile of where the beach will be after that renourishment?
I think you're referencing the one that Marinix Construction's about to undertake.
Correct.
Is that correct? I have not seen the volume come in yet for what the plan is for that, but we can take a look for sure, and get an idea of where the beach would end up after that.
I mean, to me, it'd be interesting to see where we are now and then where we're projected to be at the end of the renourishment cycle.
So I wanted to clarify something, and this, I've watched you present this twice now, so I had a chance to go back and start doing some more digging. But just to clarify, that from my understanding, the 13-foot limit was all predicated on this equilibrium beach profile that they're using to calculate this is the natural state that the beach would try. And so the 13-foot was really driven by 4 parts of our beach where we start hitting less than 0.5% grade out to the ocean, being the end of the beach, and then developing this profile side. I'm not sure where that profile comes from. That's how much sand should be in stable beach. So it doesn't apply, especially in the inlet areas. That was never intended to apply. It was only to apply in those portions where the water actually hits that 13 limit some, 1,000, 1,400 feet out. And part of that is when you look at that profile, I think it was like 265 cubic feet would fit from the high tide mark out to that 13-foot mark. So that excess 100-plus cubic feet of sand is what defines how much, quote, beach we would have. Now, if that slid into the profile, the natural tendency would be for that sand to be blown back up onto the beach. So that gets back where you were showing these profiles with a lot of that volume out. It would be expected, and is that correct, that sand would naturally want to tend to build back up onto the beach? So renourishing would not necessarily be necessary when nature would actually do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, let me break all those parts down and well understood. So the first part, when you're talking about the -13 and how that was developed, yeah, so our understanding is that there was a historical look at the surveys through time, and more or less a composite shape of a profile was determined along different reaches of the island, which would represent a healthy shape. And that is then translated landward or seaward to fill up where it would take to intersect. Sorry, I saw a message come in from Sean. What it would take to build out that 380 cubic yards a foot. And so that most clearly applies to the central portions of the beach where you can reach that minus 13. It looks like it struggles around the inlets because you do get those masses of sand that present themselves in the profile, and you can and quickly account for that sand in those areas that are in the offshore rather than the onshore. So this kind of leads back to what we were saying about that there's not a one-size-fits-all for all parts of the island. It would need to be taken in different compartments, per se. And then the second part of your question was, could you remind me what the second one part was again?
I'm trying to remember what it was.
Oh, it was the shifting down and back up.
Would the natural tendency
shifting
in
down
that
back up. Yeah,
profile,
thank you.
would it
Yeah,
be
yeah,
to shift
that's right.
back up?
Correct. Yeah. So there's a concept in coastal engineering that we call the depth of closure, and it's like when you start looking at historical surveys over a long period of time in cross section, they all tend to kind of start overlapping at certain parts of the beach, and they're usually offshore. And so as long as the sand is more landward of that, it will have a tendency over time to be blown on shore, like you were saying. Now, over time, sometimes storm impacts occur and some of that sand can be lost, but the overall idea is that eventually that sand that exists landward of the depth of closure will be blown on shore. Now, for planning purposes, it can be advantageous to look at how much it would take to build back your beach to a specified design, and still let that sand exist in the offshore and also then eventually make its way onshore. And at that point, you've built back a certain condition, and then you also have additional sand that, apparently would make its way back on shore over time too.
All right, any final questions? Or
So I guess, what do you need from us? This gets back to,
You have everything you need?
Well,
Yeah,
maybe-
right now,
Zach, let me
Go ahead.
just kind of address that a little bit, and then I'll turn it over to you. But FOTH has been working on really the alternatives analysis. I mean, that was what we hired them to do, look at groins, look at, the ideas that you've kind of posed to us in the past. I think that they felt like the idea of a minimum healthy beach was kind of a starting point in terms of we need to know this data point, and I think they felt like that was probably a 2-3 hour discussion, and now I think they've spent 2 or 3 months on it. And really, that part of it, I think, is not really the bulk of their work and what they've been hired to do. So they have been, and Chris has said, spinning our wheels a bit on this one point of it, and it's been keeping us to progressing to the rest of the work. So we had talked to them and doing a little bit of an analysis between, and really we have given them 2 different ideas about a minimum healthy beach. We gave them the ad hoc committee's recommendation from a year ago, and then we gave them more recently the current committee's recommendation from very recently. And they've spent some time kind of analyzing really the difference between those two to understand, how far apart are the various recommendations. And that goes back to the slide of 380 cubic feet per cubic yard really translates to about 180 feet from the measuring point. So it sounds like the two are not radically different for large parts of the island, but there are some parts where they're off. So we have talked about the idea of them kind of looking at it, giving their best kind of splitting the difference type analysis of establishing that line, just for the purpose, for the time being, of getting off stall and doing the alternatives analysis. They've agreed that if the city wants to continue kind of digging in really on this issue, they could assist us, they could help us with that work. We could do it separately, we could go about it any which way that we chose to. They would then come back, if the city council says, hey, we want a new minimum healthy beach profile, we could then ask them to plug that into the work that they're about to do and they have underway now with the alternatives analysis, and say, okay, we chose this line, it sounds like city council has now chosen a line that's that line minus or plus X. We either think the alternatives completely are the same, or we think that that may change the way that we view them. So we have sensed the need to just get them going on the original part of that work, so we've kind of asked them to press on and allow really council to give us direction with, do we want to just table it for a future discussion? Probably is going to require different engagement with FOTH. Do we want to see how it comes back, see what the results are, and make a decision there? But I do think there's a need to kind of separate the two tasks. If minimum healthy beach conversation and task is going to be one, that's taking up as much time as it appears to be taking up with them.
I kind of see this a little, maybe I'm interpreting this a little different, but I guess what I'm hearing from Zach's presentation was looking to approve a 380 cubic yard per linear foot as a healthy beach profile was not the way, we shouldn't have even gone down that trail, because 380 cubic yards per foot doesn't necessarily translate into a healthy beach. So, I mean, I think we went down that bunny trail as the ad hoc committee, and probably should never even try to undertake approving, a one number fits all. And I think what I'm hearing is one number doesn't fit all, and I think I'm hearing Felt Olson say, let them just go with their, let's let them come back to us, like maybe the consultant should, and tell us what it ought to be based on reach per reach per reach. Am I hearing that wrong, Zach, or are you kind of recommending that you're gonna go with this and tell us what you would recommend for the healthy beach profile along each of our reaches based on some metrics, but they may not be all the same throughout all reaches?
Yeah, I think our approach right now will be to go ahead with assuming, and we'll include these in our report too, making assumptions about what the beach would be maintained at this point. And as Douglas noted a moment ago, that if this issue is revisited by the council, then at that point, if there are decisions made about what distance or what metric the city would like to use, that we can use what work has already been done and update that based on future decisions.
So you have what you need to move forward to get us a report on what we've contracted you to do by July 2nd?
Yeah.
So,
Well, we will.
Quick
Go ahead.
point of clarification, the beach ad hoc committee's report, and not that it actually is more complex than a 380 per cubic yard. If you remember that graph, the inlets went to a very high volume, and it kind of speaks to it wasn't 380 at the inlets, just for the record.
Understood.
Yeah. It goes off to kind of deal with this depth of closure being way out.
So without considering your
it's-
profile, you could still have X number of cubic yards, any number of cubic yards per foot of linear feet, and it wouldn't be a healthy beach.
Yeah, but I do think I think they're going to determine a line, kind of look at the various lines that have been, and come up with what they think is a reasonable starting point. Include that, do their analysis, and if we come up with something different, or if we want it to be looked at in the context of a different line, we would go back to them and ask them to address that.
Yeah, that's correct, Douglas. That's the approach we're taking.
all right, Zach, well, thank you. We appreciate the time you took here.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
All right, the next item on our agenda is the dashboard of city operations and short-term rental reports. And Douglas, I assume you're gonna
Yes.
take us through that.
Yep, I will. I'll start with the dashboard. We have, just kind of start with vacancies. We have Janice, obviously, is still a vacancy we're looking to try to fill. Have not, haven't had any interviews yet for new potential candidates for that position, but hopeful those will start next week. We have one detective vacancy and one beach service officer vacancy in the police department, 2 paramedic firefighter vacancies in Public Works, and Robert's promotion has created a vacancy, I'm sorry, did I say 2 paramedics?
Yeah.
In Public Works, I'm at fire. Assistant Public Works Director vacancy in Public Works. Other just kind of noteful things on the dashboard, we obviously only have 1 month. We've ended the the license year for short-term rentals, so that number begins all over and climbs up for the year. So that's going to be low here for at least a few months while it builds back up. I think that we are, there's still about 30 at last count that are in the queue being processed, and those will continue to trickle in and be renewed for
They
at
seem
least
like
several
they're-
months.
They seem like on a end of May timeframe. For some reason, they're way ahead of where they were last May. Whether people are coming in faster for renewal, I don't know what it is, but it's up by 20%.
Yeah, I think that we noticed that as well, and there was we did change the application process a little bit and required a little bit more documentation, really, a year and a half ago. We think that might be folks getting dialed into the renewal process a little bit better. So that's kind of our best guess as to why they're being processed a little bit quicker and applied for easier as
That was-
people get used to that
Excuse me,
application. Yeah,
In prior years, and I think I've seen 2 of them actually, we've had a heat map generated of the short-term rentals. Is it possible to get a heat map
I believe
generated
so.
for
Yeah, I think-
the last, like
Full
April
year.
26th? Yeah, get that full year.
Versus April 25.
Well, I think the last one we have is 24.
yeah, I think that heat map is a product of Rentalscape.
23.
Is that a picture of it?
Uh-huh,
Does it have the Rentalscape?
no, nothing on it.
Oh, that is,
I think you did that internally.
yeah,
You
that
did it
was.
internally.
uh,
I'm just
I bet
asking
Josh
for an
could do
internal
that
one.
Yeah, that's not, that was a full GIS
That's a good one.
for I think the referendum, right?
Yeah, it
That was being
yep.
tracked. Yeah,
It was
that-
Which
those
one?
were- Those were
2010.
just being tracked.
Which one
I
are
think
you
they might
looking
have
at?
used
But it was a good tracking,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
as far as, it was a
So
good
that was
visual
Matt's-
anyway of what it is. That's what I'm talking about.
Matt was a GIS technician. We do not have Matt or that capability. So it will not be easy for us, but let us look at that. See if
Okay.
we can.
I bet Joshua could, yeah, he's nodding his head.
He's on his head, yes.
That's a,
Well, for him, that'll be about a 10-minute exercise.
I love him.
When we were doing, I
Take me.
created one when we were doing the discussion and planning, and that was what was that, 24?
Yeah.
So the hardest part was getting the actual lat long of all the properties, so I actually have all that.
Maybe David's gonna be
If-
here. We'll see what Joshua can do.
I'll
Joshua works magic with it.
It's just a good visual of where they are,
Okay.
especially,
Remember, there's a
you know,
lot of
middle of the island,
Yep.
wherever they are.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
The other thing, we probably, just for apples to apples, we probably ought to use units instead of licenses, because now we've got that 119 aggregate.
Yeah, that'd be good.
So well, think we've had that conversation, right? The 119? Where, I mean, we.
I'm just saying
we-
for plotting. If we're
Oh, for plotting,
Plotting,
gotcha.
for that-
yeah,
for that.
density, yeah.
Well, they'll show up, they'll, because they're still licensed, but yeah, they will.
It will show
Be sure
up.
those
They'll
two
all
show
show
up.
Are there any other comments on these?
No.
Next item is the financial review. First item is the April financial statement, page 28 in the packet. Deborah, I think.
Yes, this is actually May's information. Okay, actual, as of May 31st, we are at $25 million to a budget of $32 million. That's about 77% of the budget. The city is forecast to end the year with approximately $2 million in revenue over budget, which is about 6%. As far as expenditures overall, across all funds, we're at 75% of the budget. We're also, that's also tracking well for May with 1 month remaining. The projected overall net position, which is revenue minus expenditures, that for the year end is $6 million, which is about $3.4 million better than budget, is what we're projecting right now. One thing I'll note on this cover sheet is the beach preservation fund that changed from, the forecast changed from the previous month because we were initially anticipating some cost happening in June. So we had grant revenue projected in June, but it looks like that project won't get started until the end of this month, and we'll experience cost in the next fiscal year. So therefore, the grant revenue has been moved to the next fiscal year. Just to go through some of the funds where we are, the general fund, revenue is about 83% of budget, forecast to finish at 896 above budget. Expenditures are at 87% of budget, expected to end slightly under budget, about 351,000. And we'll talk about this a little bit more in detail later, but the net position forecast is 1.2 positive, ending the year pretty strong for the general fund. The capital projects fund revenue is about 51% of the budget, forecast to finish at 750,000 above budget. Expenditures are at 56% of the budget, projected to be about 526,000 over budget. And that's, of course, due to some of, mostly, the waterway project that we are doing 2 phases this fiscal year. And then, of course, you know, those costs were a little bit more than we originally anticipated. We have some grant revenue that we are applying to help offset that cost. The municipal accommodations fee fund revenue is strong at 89% of budget, forecast at 742 above budget. Expenditures are at 47%, and we're expected to end at 172 below budget. The net position forecast at $1.2 million. That's, $1.29 million. Hospitality revenue is at 82% of budget, forecast at 101 above budget. Expenditures are at 68%, expected to finish around 145 below budget. It looks like we are forecasting a little deficit there, about $55,000. The state accommodations, revenues are lagged slightly at 72% of budget, but expected to recover. finishing at about 267 above budget. And expenditures are currently at 46%, forecasted to end at 628,000 under budget. Net position forecast at $538,000. Beach preservation, which we just spoke about, some changes there. Revenue is at 97% of budget, forecast at 648,000 above. Expenditures, of course, are higher than we budgeted at 182. And that's mostly due to the emergency work that took place earlier this year. But we're still anticipating it will end with a positive net position because of the revenues should exceed the expenditures. Marina fund, revenues are significantly below expectation at 43%. Forecast is pretty much flat expenditures, and that's because of we had anticipate the dredging, which had a grant in there of 1.5, and that has, of course, been deferred to next year. The disaster recovery fund, it's kind of stable right at what we said that the budget is anticipating. And then the smaller funds are tracking compared to budget. So overall, the city is in a healthy and positive financial position as of May. Revenue performance is strong across most funds, especially tourism right now, but we have started to see a slight decline in our tourism collections for the third quarter. But we're still anticipating that the city will end much better than anticipated. I'll just go through the general fund, highlight some of those variances. We are anticipating, okay, so the total general fund, like I stated, we're year-to-date actual at $13.7 million and the budget of $16.49. We're forecasting at 17.39, so we are anticipating about $895,000 above budget. The categories that are performing really well are property taxes, our business licenses. We're at 89% of budget on the business licenses, and we're a little bit ahead of prior year. Building permits, we are at $1 million. That's 126% of budget. We're running ahead of expectations. We are forecasting about $285,000 above budget, but this is lower than prior year, and that's because prior year had a huge renovation project in that. Rental licenses are 93% of budget, slightly above where we were last year. But the forecast, we think we might be a little bit under budget, maybe by $23,000. Insurance costs, insurance and utility licenses, we're only at 14% because the majority of that revenue comes in later this year. And, but we're anticipating that we will be above budget for that. Parking revenues is a little flat. We're at 57% of budget. Expenses for the general fund, we're at 83% of the annual budget. Most departments are close to or under the target, with a few exceptions. And I'll briefly mention those. The mayor and council department is 86% of budget. We anticipate that we're not going to spend. There will be some savings in that department this year. General government is 82% of the budget, and we're forecasting $180,000 under budget. There are some savings in salaries and a little bit of savings in some of the operational costs, and that's due to positions not being filled, one position not being filled at all, and then another position started later than anticipated or budgeted. Police department is 85% of budget. They forecast, we have them at about 168,000 under budget. And fire department is 92% of their budget. They are a little bit higher in their personnel costs, mostly due to overtime. Hopefully, overall, their budget will be on track, even though personnel costs are trending higher. Public Works is already at 101 of their budget. And that is due to vehicle maintenance and temporary labor. Right now, they're under budget, but we are forecasting they may be a little bit over budget. And the vehicle costs, of course, due to the aging vehicles we have, is driving that cost. The building and planning, they are at 84% of their budget. They're about 30,000 under. And as mentioned before, they have, the only thing that is out, is notable is they have contract costs for a position that was not filled, and now the position is filled. But personnel will be under, and contractual services will be over. So the general fund is healthy and performing above expectations. Now, I want to talk about, this is page 31. This is where our fund balances are and our cash balances are. The few things I do want to note on this is, if you notice the Beach Preservation Fund, it's at 21 million compared to 11 million last year this time. And that 21 million is contributed to 8 million from Wild Dunes that is sitting in an escrow account. But because the city holds those funds, we have to record them. The other thing I want to note is that the city received $180,000 in interest for the month of May, and this brings the total to $1.9 million year to date. So the LGIP investment accounts they're still performing very well. Okay, page 32. Page 32. These are where we anticipate they're kind of estimates of where we see fund balances going for future years. This gives us where we project our fund balance will end, and some of our large expenses, for this current year and for upcoming years. Of course, remember, this does not include any posted revenue, but the fund balances include everything that we project. The page 35 is, of course, the reconciliation between cash and fund balances. And now we can go to page 36, which are the tourism revenues, and show how those are tracking. For our municipal accommodation fees, the city received $127,000 for this last month. We are still at 4% higher than we were last year, even though we are missing. We still have a few months to collect because we haven't received those funds yet. The city, we have a meeting with the county next week to kind of try to get some information on a better way to receive this money, or a quicker way to receive this money, and see if they can provide us additional information than what they're already providing. So the next meeting, we'll see, give you an update on how that went. Page 37 is our state accommodations fund, and that 222,000, that is less than what we received last year, this quarter. But we're at about 1% higher than we were last year, but I think it's about 3% higher than budget at this point. The pass-through, we received 113,000. That brings us to about 13% higher than we were last year this time. And for the last quarter, we're anticipating $338,000 for that. Hospitality taxes did bounce back in this month. We're at 174,000. We are so that we were, flat the entire year, and now we're at 1% higher than we were previous year. We are anticipating we'll probably do about the same thing we did last year for next month, but we'll see. Hopefully it'll be better. Hopefully tourism will pick up a little bit with the new restaurant come to town. Hopefully that opens in June. The beach preservation, same as Muni. We're at collected 127 at 4% higher than we were last year. And the local option sales tax brought in 113,000. That gets us to 5% over per year.
That's really lagging, isn't it? That's
Oh, yeah, we have 3
from a
months.
month, yeah. Is it always that delayed in getting?
It is, yes, sir. That's all that, project worksheets, unless we want to go through these.
No.
Okay. Unless you have any questions for me, let me know. Otherwise, we'll move on to budget.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
You're just gonna talk about the changes from?
yes, sir. Well, let's talk about changes. Did we not talk about changes? Okay, so changes from the last time we met. We talked about changing the millage from 2.77 to 1.8. We did that. That dropped the revenue down to by $286,000. We removed the increase for license permits and parking. That decreased by $713,000. We did some minor, forecasts which updated revenue driven by fund balances, and so there are some changes there. But the major things were we added some money for a recruiting firm to hire a HR manager. So that expense is $16,500. We added some funds for a business license audit or review. That was about $25,200, and it's $200 just to even our percentages off. We really said $25,000, but I even our percentages off. And then one thing that was an oversight that I had to put back in was the green space and parking for the marina. We had taken it out in one of these versions to take out the transfer, but in taking out the transfer, it kind of got removed from the budget. So we had to put that back in. And then the biggest thing is that we did not talk about that came, that was just a discussion from the contractor, is the money that we had budgeted for this year to be spent for the beach renourishment project in FY '26. That money is not going to be spent. So we removed the grant revenue as well as the costs for that and put it into FY '27.
It will be spent, just not before the
Yeah.
end of June.
Right.
So does that
right.
mean that the sand, we won't see sand in June?
That's
Is that
We
correct?
won't,
get billed for it.
that's correct. There,
me see
we
it.
probably
Will we
will not
see
see
sand?
sand. that, I don't expect that we will.
Will
It'll be-
mobilization happen in
Yes.
June?
Yes.
Okay.
But they have said they do not expect that we would have our first bill, which would come with the first bit of sand before the end of June. That it
But there's
will be-
no delay in mobilization
That's
or
correct.
sand getting on that beach?
That's correct.
Okay.
They did tell us, I mean, they have kind of told us the end of June, early July. I would say there hasn't been a delay, but they have now said, we will not send you a bill in June, which translates to sand will not be there by the end of June.
Are we still looking at July to November, or is that?
Yeah.
Is November the latest, or is it?
I think so, yeah. We have our beach renourishment meeting tomorrow at 1 o'clock. We can ask these questions there, but
Yeah, when we met at the facilities, I think we were talking till June to November.
Because, I mean, they're starting in June. You're just not going to have any sand.
That's
So
correct.
It's what, 3 months up at the north end and two, and then
Sean and Josh are gonna have to, yeah, here we go. They're gonna- And I think you have dates there. I can't see.
I think this is, if we can keep this being communicated out as much as possible, anything we can do even beyond the website, just to keep everybody apprised of when the mobilization or the sand is appearing in front of their properties or what have you, then they can plan accordingly.
But this is not a change. There's no delay, no change.
No.
This is just a matter of when we actually get the bill. So
Well, it's when the
that's,
start date moves, so if the start date moves, then the end date, potentially. Start date was gonna be June.
Well, they always said very end of June. I
well,
think
they're
we're,
still
I think we're
starting
talking.
in June. It's just
Yeah.
the fact that we're not going to get a bill until July. I mean, if they
We're
do
starting
work,
mobilization.
if they do work on June 29th, they're not going to bill us on, we're not paying for it on June 29th. We're paying it in July. That's
Yes,
my understanding.
yeah. I think in reality,
It's-
they said sand could be there by the end of June or the beginning of July. I think they're now pinpointing that to be beginning of July. I don't think it's a change. I think it's kind of, they're dialing in, they're focusing in an actual kind of.
I'm just looking for
date.
broad strokes.
Yeah.
At this point.
And we will talk a little bit more about this at the council meeting, but to Scott's point, we're trying to kind of develop a robust method to put the word out that we hope, because we're getting, not inundated, but we're getting a lot of phone calls about when will they be in front of our house. And, it's best guesses. We now have it kind of within months, but we think that we can get it, still is going to be a guess, but we think we can get it closer than to within a few months. So we're gonna talk through this a little bit more at the council meeting.
Any other changes or items on the budget?
No, sir. Oh, I don't have them. That was,
No.
okay.
So the process is we're gonna have a public meeting on the budget prior to our council meeting.
That's
in a
correct.
month, and then second reading to approve it at our council meeting.
That's correct.
Any other comments or questions on the budget? Next item on the agenda is to review of business licenses and short-term rental license revenues. It's on page 136 of the packet.
This was put in at the request of the admin committee. And Scott, you can, I think the intention was to, and I'll also just say that the admin committee is talking about the auditing process for business licenses. So at kind of a high level, just wanted to start looking at the revenues that are being reported with an eye for checking back on those reported revenues through an auditing process. We've had some good conversations with Charleston County. They have done some auditing for us in the past. They are still agreeable to doing that, not only for our business licenses, but for all of our taxes, for all of our hospitality accommodations taxes. They could do that same service. Generally, their fee is 1/2 of whatever they recoup. So we kind of talked around how much we expect that one half would be, and we're trying to figure out, we believe, but have not verified yet with an auditing company, that their fees would just be a flat fee. So we've been talking to, or an hourly rate, not a cost-sharing arrangement. We have talked to other communities that have done similar things, so our next steps are to identify some auditing firms that would be able to provide the service, and have the admin committee review those options and give us a direction as to how they recommend moving forward with the audit. So I think this is mainly here to just kind of start eyeing the revenue streams and have an eye on checking those amounts.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think, we talked about this, the admin, auditing's a technique, but really, I think what we're trying to look at, we talked about this, $1 million target where we look for either additional revenues through leakage, stopping any leakage that we may be incurring, or expense reductions. And I think that, when we look at revenue assurance, each of the line items is going to, if we're looking at it, and, all we're doing is trying to ensure that the city's getting every dollar that they're supposed to be getting. Each audit or review, or some line items may not even need an audit. It might just be a relationship kind of take a look at, or have our financial analysts and the finance team take a look at and see if there are processes that we might want to benchmark against other municipalities to ensure that we're providing the proper documentation, things of that nature, so that we get the dollars. I did have one question on even just this schedule. This schedule is helpful because I think it shows what the scope of the licensing is. I happen to, and I think Deborah, I think we've been producing these for a couple of years now. I think it would be helpful, maybe for the next package, just kind of look year to year, what these how these have evolved, because I looked at this year's report, and we had 1,973 licenses representing $365 million in revenue. Last year's report had 1,911 licenses representing $407 million in revenue. So there's a difference in just the reported revenue with 1 year of, it's like $42 million difference, although the license numbers are higher. So I think it would be helpful as a starting point just to even look at the number of licenses year to year, find out which licenses are the same, which ones are different, what's causing some differences. But if we're down $42 million in reported revenue, I would question how come our business license revenues are up. Maybe they're higher, but I don't know how that happens if we're based on base rates plus a percentage of our reported revenues. So those are the relationships I think we need to take a look at. And,
We did go up, right, on our fees?
Could be the fees went up 15%.
Yeah. And I know we did have at least one, massive construction project. So we do know, we probably can identify a handful of outliers that happened last year.
It's basically a walk on, how do you walk from last year to this year. I think that will help us. And then we can determine, I think before we embark on a specific audit, we really should define that scope very clearly so that we don't go on a bunny trail somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to ask, and I started looking at this and comparing them to last year's numbers. And again, there's, I guess, because the type of business could affect how much the percentage of licensing fees. So the fact that we have one license in these ranges, it kind of, there's not an easy one-to-one comparison. I was kind of like Scott, it's like, I'm assuming a lot of these, the top end are construction projects, because we go from 12 over 600 to drop down to 9 this year. And again, it's not like businesses are closing left and right, but the construction, I guess, is accounting for a lot of these higher end ones. So it makes it really hard to look from a comparison.
Yeah.
So I don't know, again, can these be broken out by the license type? Or is that just too much trouble?
It's a database, it should be able to, I think we should be able to slice it any way we want to slice it. Yeah.
They are broken out by license type, we just do a summary, but they
Yeah.
are broken out by license type.
And this is a great start. This is
But-
just
Yeah.
just to
And
see
we
how
have
it's
all
read.
all the data that from year to year that breaks them out by license. Is
Yeah,
that
it could-
something that-
And then, you know, you could see turnover, are the 1911 and
We
the
can.
1973, or are they different? How much turnover we have? You know, things.
Yeah, that's,
There's a lot of
Deborah
ways
does-
to look at this.
bring up a point that we're not allowed, we can't get the data so granular that we would be public, if there was one license type, we couldn't report it that way, but like the 9, I mean, we certainly could kind of break up what the
The-
distribution is, so that it could get tough if we started having 1s and 2s that you could
You don't wanna
identify
disclose
exactly who.
confidential
Right.
information.
Yeah.
Understood.
I do think it's largely big construction project driven, but we could, and that will definitely.
And I assume that's why I was kind of asking that.
So the next step is on this is, it's going back, it's at the admin committee?
Yes,
and then-
yep.
Yeah.
Can
We're
I
gonna
ask
keep
one
working.
question on the short-term rental one too? I don't know if you can put that one up.
Page 137, Josh.
So this one, I think, is reporting 142 million in revenue, and if we look at, again, I think it'd be great to compare this to last year. If you look at that 140, if my math is right, 145 million, that's the baseline for calculating accommodations tax? I'm guessing. So if 1% of that, 1% of that's $1.4 million. If you go to page 36 in our packet, and the municipal accommodations tax is also 1%, it's at roughly 2.1 million. So what is the difference between the 1.4 that's reporting on our rental licenses versus the 2.1 that's coming? And I think this is one where we should look a couple of years, because we might have gotten a settlement or things of that nature, but it looks like this would imply that we should have $210 million of rental revenue that's generating accommodations tax.
Is the
to get to
are the
That's the
hotels
hotels.
Well,
included?
the hotel will be part of it, but there's only 256 rooms on the island that, and if you do the math on the $70 million difference, we'd have to be getting a rate of like $750 per room, 100% occupancy for 365 days a year, so
Probably not that.
probably not that. No.
When there recently settlement
Whether
on
it
the
be-
Airbnb,
I don't think that
It
wouldn't
was
be,
like last year.
Yeah, last year.
It's, again,
year.
it's just one of those things, I think if we can, it would be nice to reconcile, if that 2.1 million is over a few years, how do we tie that back to the short-term rental revenue? And then, you know, we can figure out what the hotel revenues are. We do know what the hotel revenues are.
yep.
Yeah, and one thing for sure is license year compared to fiscal year, which is the schedule.
Those have been
but,
145 million for the last, I think, 3 years, roughly in that neighborhood.
In
So
that
that we're up about, yes, it looks like 70 million of revenue needs to be accounted for somewhere. Anyway.
Okay, any other
No.
comments? Anybody? I guess we'll hear more at our next meeting, after the admin committee takes it again. Next item is procurement. We, first item in under procurement is reported purchases between 10,000 and 25,000. It's on page 138 of the packet. I think there's a couple of them. Anything to comment on those, Douglas?
No, just work that needs to be reported to council.
Okay. Next item is discussion consideration of award of a bid to John C. Craven Roofing for $23,075 for City Hall roof installation. Again, it's on page 139 of the packet. And Douglas, this is something that I never heard about before, but what's the,
Yeah, so we have a roof that needs to be replaced. We had a lot of leaks that led to the termites. We had various parts of that roof fail. It's now approaching 20 years old. So we had numerous folks up there, and they all agreed that the useful life of this roof is done,
So
so.
this is the lowest bid that came back.
Yes, yeah, it happens to be the company that put that roof on 20 years ago, and their workmanship was great, and it lasted as long as can be expected. So they could put another one on for us.
And this is a total roof replacement?
Yes,
Okay.
yep.
I'll make a motion that we approve.
Second.
Any other comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item C, discussion consideration of July 2026 purchase of 3 SUVs and 1 truck from Santee Automotive for Police Department. The total amount is $138,750 for the SUVs, $51,047 for the truck. This is something that we talked about in public safety as well. It's gonna go, this is really for next year's budget, but to get a jump on, it seems like in government budget cycle, everybody rushes to get these vehicles, so we wanna kinda get ahead of the curve, and Chief has brought this forward for us to put, obviously it'd be contingent on the budget passage at the end of the month.
Yeah,
Did I
both
miss
of these,
anything?
no, that's it, and both are in that same, both C and D are really the same situation, and both purchases are being made off of the state purchasing list.
Motion to approve?
Is this for both of them? Are we doing
Do
C
one
and
at a
D?
time, I think. Or,
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
do foresee, motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? How about a motion for the second?
Motion to approve?
Second.
For D, this is for the fire departments. Any discussion or questions on that one? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item E is discussion consideration of AI signal software for $127,400. Plus a small amount, or some amount, I won't say small, but some amount for installation. And $3,690 annually for service packages and maintenance.
Is this in the updated budget?
This is in the 2000, the next year's budget as well, correct.
correct.
And
Well, I think we were proceeding with it unbudgeted, but I
Yeah.
think now,
Is it, I don't know if it's, is it in, but that's, it's an plus the ones that.
I think
how
it's
much is the
150,
installation?
I think is what it was in there for potential. The installation's probably gonna be less than 10,000, but
Could we get a little more detail for the people watching at home? What is this for?
sure. So this is to put artificial intelligence technology on our stoplight. So the thought is that it will detect when there's under normal conditions, it operates similar to what the light operates now. But once traffic starts to back up, really around the curve, it's going to signal that traffic's backing up and then change the traffic signaling to try to get cars through that intersection as fast as possible. And so that, again, it's using a technology that I'll say is artificial intelligence. It's probably not as, maybe as advanced as what some of the current technology is around artificial, but it's definitely a step ahead of where we are today. And I'll leave it to David, you or Ashley, are part of the Public Safety Committee, that we listened to 3 vendors, and this is the one that we chose.
But doesn't the traffic back up because it's going onto the connector at the S curve? Most of the traffic does not go through the stoplight. It goes off the island. How will that alleviate, how will this alleviate that problem?
Well, it's gonna, the opportunity that this presents is that it can then be connected into the traffic lights at Rifle Range and even at 17, because it's the same vendor that has the lights there.
But it's
So
also,
you get the whole
It's also-
corridor moving.
but it's also the main issue is that light, because people, we're getting too many people going north, turning, and not enough, so if
It's
if
definitely
that
a-
light's working better, it would make a huge
It's definitely a
difference.
backup at the light. The zippering effect is
Right.
what really slows things down, because there's not much of a zipper effect. You'll get people turning left, that are preventing the people that are turning right to get on the connector. And it's just not managed in the most optimal way. So this would present technology to manage it versus some fixed control that we have now.
Well, it'll reduce the amount of time that we have to actually have our police out there directing traffic, hopefully. So when it rains, it will sense that there's a change in traffic and go into a different timing sequence than.
Why is this not a state cost instead of our cost?
We did start down that option, and they indicated that they were not willing to do it.
We talked to Mount Pleasant about what John just mentioned about tying into the rifle range and the Highway 17 light, and what did they say?
Yeah, they actually were the, kind of the impetus for this, a lot of this discussion is they are using it with, I think what they would say is great success in the town of Mount Pleasant. It's the same firm, as John mentioned, that's being recommended. They have even they have indicated that they may have a willingness to help us maintain it over here. So they have, they've definitely.
Okay, wait, what'd you say? They have indicated a willingness to maybe help us maintain it, is that what you said?
That's correct.
They
Yeah,
maybe help us maintain it over here.
Correct.
How about over there?
Yes, there is also a willingness to, if we would like, to pursue integrating the two signals together.
Would that be
kinda have-
additional cost, or would this cover it?
No, that is not an additional cost. This-
It's not.
That's correct.
And what he's talking about is the maintenance, though, is that we would have to enter into, the state's not gonna maintain the new technology or whatever the hardware is. And we're gonna have to enter into a management agreement.
Signal management agreement.
Right. But the opportunity is, since Mount Pleasant already has that same technology and vendor, and knows how to maintain it, that we can enter into an agreement with them for them to maintain our hardware for us. And they're willing to do that.
Well, I will say their engineers have expressed a willingness. We don't have an official agreement or anything else. They've indicated that.
I think the term I'm looking for is a fully committed integration of the system with Mount Pleasant.
Yeah, that we do not have
We
that,
do not have that.
not a commitment.
But we don't need that in order to get the improvement that here at our light.
Here at our light.
Yeah.
But what I'm concerned is what happens when they leave here.
Yeah, so this gives us the opportunity to continue to work with them to get that, because we have the technology in place to do it now.
Have we approached him about fully integrated commitment, Mount Pleasant?
No, I think this is the first step. I mean, and I would say, I think, and not to belabor the point, but we could talk to the chief, that generally folks are agreeing, folks that are watching the traffic with an eye for improving the flow of the traffic, that once they get onto the connector, that's a big part of the pinch. This will help the traffic flow onto the connector and get the folks to, I guess, Riviera before the first light or rifle range. But what we hear a lot of times is once you're on it, you're free flowing for a bit. Obviously, there's traffic on the connector as well, but this is really geared at getting the traffic off of Palm Boulevard and onto the connector. That would be a hurdle. If we can get past that, I think we would say that we've made a great improvement. The next stage would be, if we then are now getting people so efficiently into the town of Mount Pleasant, would be to integrate their, and they call it a flushing program, that once they sense a backup, the lights will then give priority and allow that stream of traffic to flush. I think that traffic light is already doing that, and it will happen when the backup begins in Mount Pleasant. I think it'll automatically do it. Really, the commitment that we're talking about, kind of separately from the functionality of the AI, is, as John mentioned, they've said that, when we have an electrical outage, the system sometimes will need a reboot. It will need to be recalibrated. They have folks on staff that could potentially help us with that maintenance.
Mount
Are there
Pleasant
any,
does?
are
or-
any plans,
Yes.
to monitor the, performance of the system after it's installed? Are there
Yes.
any concrete monitoring plans in place?
Yes, so part of what happens with this particular vendor, and really all of them that were considered, is part of their initial setup will be monitoring the intersection, doing what I would kind of classify as a small traffic study at that intersection, develop parameters for it to operate within, and then they will monitor it to be sure that their programming and the system is working as they intended it to work. So that is part of the setup and the installation of the system. There is then a maintenance agreement, but I would say that's more like just your software. You know, like you have an agreement with Adobe for Acrobat that you pay annually. It's not somebody kind of constantly watching. So it's not something that it's being pitched as something that, once it's set up, it should be operating pretty independently without a lot of human kind of oversight.
Well, one other thing I'd like clarification on. Is there hopes that this will relieve the backup on Palm Boulevard, Cameron, and Waterway, and like 21st Avenue, when we have these huge backups on the weekend?
Yes, so the way they've contemplated the system is there would be sensors at the intersection of Palm Boulevard and the connector. There will then be a secondary sensor around the S-curve, and the system will know when there is a tremendous backup going beyond the S-curve. When it senses that, it will go into what they call a flush mode, which will allow that traffic to free flow for some number of minutes to get off the island and to start to allow that gridlock to leave. It's obviously also monitoring the traffic coming in this direction, because you're
Right.
gonna have it from so it's gotta do some kind of sharing and some AI magic to keep it in equilibrium. But what's happening now is it's getting so backed up in one direction, and it's giving priority to other directions and not allowing it to ever clear. So that would be the issue that we'd be trying to fix.
I've noticed on, a couple of weekends, it's not that much, but when it happens, it's really bad. That you go down Palm this way, and I've seen it days backed up to between 6th and 5th Avenue.
Yeah,
And so I'm just curious to see how getting the people off Connector this way is going to improve people coming from, the south and turning left.
yeah, I think we're hearing that,
I don't
and it
need,
is a little bit of a sharing the pain kind of situation,
Yeah.
but I think we're hearing that in some instances, it's going to almost to 41st.
Yeah.
That way, so
Yeah.
it's going like 25 blocks that way and 4 blocks that way. So
Okay.
As
it's
soon as
not-
you get past the merge, it stops. You merge onto the connector and you start going.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
And
ridiculous.
I would just also kind of say for the group that every engineer that's looked at it has said there is a finite carrying capacity for the connector. When the connector is full gridlock, or you have an accident, or something is hindering that flow, the system obviously is not going to fix for that. But it's going to fix for the situation that Katie has described, where once you get on the connector, it's free flowing, it's gonna improve, and I say fix, it's not gonna fix it, but it is being, we are being
Make it
assured
less frustrating.
that it will greatly improve getting onto the connector.
one final comment, if I may. I've served on the CARTA board with Mayor Haney's on the board, and he attends most every meeting. And we were talking a couple of months ago about this same concept that they put in Mount Pleasant on Coleman, going up to the Ravenel Bridge, and how you can, I don't know if you noticed, but I've noticed it, you can be on Coleman and right there in front of the hardware store, and that light turns green. If the traffic is moving steadily, then you can go through Mount Pleasant, all the way to Ravenel Bridge, but I haven't stopped.
Yeah.
So I appreciate everybody bearing with me and answering my questions. I didn't realize it was the same firm that did the work for Mount Pleasant.
Yeah, their engineers speak very highly of the benefits and the success of the system in the town, so.
This
we're
also
encouraged by
prioritizes emergency vehicles. I mean, if you have an emergency vehicle, it recognizes that, correct?
Yep. And pedestrians.
And pedestrian safety.
that. I don't recall that, but if John says it does, then it does.
Yeah.
According
Lot
to
of
the
details.
according to the capabilities in the deck, it says
Yeah.
it does.
Motion to approve?
Okay, second.
Just one point of clarification, Deborah was letting me know that we have only $100,000 in next year's budget, so we could either adjust that amount for Tuesdays. You want, we'll do
Put
that.
up, what, 150 total, all in on?
Yeah, I think we
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Next item is old business, which there's none. Under new business, A, we have discussion, consideration of city's match for the USACE feasibility study to become a federally managed beach. This is $750,000, currently unbudgeted. I don't know, first thing to start here is, I guess, Douglas, you want to give us an overview of really what this is all about?
Yeah, so we have been asking, and I think this initially came out of the Ad hoc Beach Preservation Committee. The city has been asking, now I think it's been our third year, for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to consider funding a study, which would be the first step in becoming a federally managed beach. That study is a $3 million study. I'm sorry, it's a 3-year, $1.5 million study. And it has always been deemed as the necessary first step in becoming a federally managed beach. We're a little bit, I think, in a situation of the dog that caught the car, in that we have now been told by our federal lobbyists that Senator Graham has put into the federal budget for consideration their federal match. So that leaves,
27 fiscal year?
yes, October 27. So that would have, I'm sorry, beginning October 26, so between, yeah. So that has us needing to match that with $750,000 for the study. It's not, as John has mentioned, it's not in our budget currently. And if we're going to do it, we need to put it in our budget. If we decide that we're not gonna do it, yeah, we had it in 2030. So we'd be moving it.
How many
up.
people did we end up with that refused to sign the easement for this most recent one?
We ended up with 2, but I will say, and to Katie's point, the biggest hurdle that I think we are aware of to becoming a federally managed beach is there is the expectation and the requirement from the Army Corps that every adjacent property owner provide a permanent easement. Each of we know that Pawleys Island they've had a challenge with this. They're in the category of having been approved as a federal project, but they can't get all of the federal, the permanent easements necessary. Same thing is true for Edistoke. They're in the same situation where they've been through the study, they're waiting to kind of finalize their inclusion in the program, and they can't get the permanent easements.
For an idea, since our fiscal year goes July 1 to June 30, feds are further out. What if we, I don't know, I'm on the fence on this one. I kind of like to go for it as an insurance policy, but we may not be able to get the easements. What if we just pulled our 750 into the 28 fiscal budget and give us some time to flush this out a little bit? It's already in, I guess, our out years. Because it sounds like even, I mean, are we really pressed to make a decision and consider this tonight? Or is this something that we can bake on a little bit? Because the feds aren't gonna send us the money, they're not gonna send us this year.
Yeah, I have
I don't
asked.
know what the expiration is on this, but,
I have asked our lobbyists if we need it in this year's budget, and for the same exact question, he said, yes, you need the 750 in this year's budget if you want to proceed with the program.
Because of Graham requesting it, basically, right?
Yes. Yeah, I can ask, and I don't know how that would, I don't know how it would play out if they continue and put it into the federal budget. I don't know if they just, I don't know. I don't know how that process would work as to whether or not we have some more time to think about it. But I guess I will say, we have senators working on our behalf, and I think if the community is of a mindset to know, it's a tough decision, but I guess I would hope that you would just make that decision.
are we gonna get more information in a couple of months? Go ahead.
I will say, I mean, we have Fort Olson, that was one of the considerations in what they're gonna propose back to us. So I really kind of feel like we should be waiting until we get that. And as far as funding it, again, we set aside money for structures. And again, depending on what comes out of this recommendation, I just don't see making that decision until and if we can prolong this for a month or two, I guess that's the question, does it have to be answered? I think budget-wise, there's probably money there somewhere that can be rearranged, but the decision is really more hinged to me is on what comes back from Fort and Olson, on what's the best achievable, the path forward.
Are they considering this as part of their?
I thought it was part of that.
It's
I
in
heard something
there.
about, you say something, but I didn't know what the
I think
scope.
they're kind of opine on that.
Yeah, and I thought they had been talking to the Corps as part of this.
So this, Douglas, so the Wild Dunes would not be eligible for this, right?
We have included them as part of the planned area, with the idea that they could be part of the project if they were able to find enough spaces to meet the state requirements for publicly accessible beaches.
Is that
So we-
31? I think it was 31.
Yeah,
I've
some-
heard different numbers. Is it 31?
Yeah, that's what
Something like
Steve, that's what Steve said. I heard.
Okay.
So on the Foth Olson, they are, project, they are reviewing planned future projects, including, Army Corps projects on the southern end. So that's really talking about the shoal management, the kind of rehandling that they're doing on the shoals and the intercoastal. It also includes meeting with the Army Corps and gaining an understanding of future plans. So somewhat vague in what Foth is doing. I don't know that they're gonna opine on, yes, become a federal beach, or no, don't become a federal beach.
I just don't think it's realistic. I think the federal government is doing this on purpose, so they can so they can say that they're helping, and they're not. I mean, they didn't used to require 100% easements, and now they do. And it's not a wiggle room, it's not 99% is good enough. It's 100%, and they're permanent easements, they're not temporary easements. We have 2 people right now who have refused to sign temporary easements.
2 year. And
But I
There's
think that-
there's just, it's not worth $750,000 to hope that we're gonna get 100% permanent easements.
And the easements
It's
are
just
not
not gonna
only,
happen.
not only are they permanent, but even self-belief, I've heard the Army Corps say, is they're very stringent easements.
Yeah.
And they've looked at trying to lessen the requirements of them, but they've not been successful in doing that yet. So I find it highly improbable that.
And I also think
This is
it's
just a
crummy that
study.
they make you pay, they make you pay the money before they even tell you if they're gonna give it to you, or if you know if you're gonna get the easements. I mean, that,
Right.
Since the whole, since everybody
It's insane.
benefits, is this something we could ask the state to help fund our $750,000? Have we even asked our lobbyists to go get the other 750? And why wouldn't we do that? All they can say is no, but, since this is a public beach that we're trying to maintain here, why should we, have to burden the 100% of the expense on that? Maybe we can make a case
To share the cost, have the
yeah,
cost share.
absolutely.
I got a question with the actual wording. It says it's a feasibility study. So what if it comes back and we say, well, it's not feasible?
It's possible.
Then you spend,
Spend a bunch of money.
Right.
And to find out it's not feasible. I had a hard time voting for anything with feasibility. In there.
especially when it's probably unlikely that we're gonna get 100%.
And part of the feasibility or lack thereof might hinge on Wild Dunes.
Well, that's the other unknown, right? There's so many unknowns in this.
and I think
Well-
it has to be the whole beach, right?
Yeah.
So I think this is what I'm taking away, is we will not add the 750 to the budget that you're considering in 2 weeks. We will try to work through a little bit more detail as to the timeline, if we have time for both, if we have, because there's really two different questions here. The first question is, do we budget for it? The second question, if you're not budgeting for it, the kind of next step is to pull the plug with the request, the federal request.
Is there a timeline for that, Douglas, that we'd have to pull up by?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I think we could have it budgeted and just not use it. I think it may show, I guess I want to be sensitive to the work that people are doing and putting on our behalf if we don't fully intend to do anything. So I'd
Well, what
like
I'm
to be.
sensing is that there's not much support right now the way it sits, so if you wanna, instead of us voting on it tonight, if you wanna run down a couple of these questions, and we're gonna have to, bring it up at council meeting at the end of the month, and we can
Yeah.
see where we are at that.
Yeah, Deborah won't stay up all night plugging it into the next budget.
It's not,
No.
it's not in this cycle right
Yeah.
now. I think we're all.
And we'll continue to work on
How
some
do
of
we
these
get to the
questions.
How can, I don't know if we can get an answer from the state in 2 weeks, and the PRT can help us, or senators, or whatever. Maybe we can at least test the water on that.
You can't
I
test the water,
think-
but they're on
I-
our side.
They're out, yeah.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
vacation.
But you can.
I can ask, yeah.
All right. Any other comments on that?
No.
All right, the other item is under new business, a review of IT costs, which is on page 172 of the packet. Anybody
Fine
want-
with that one?
Yes, Scott, if you don't mind.
And this is just for reference, and we're not gonna go through it in glorious detail, but, we've talked about trying to dive into different expense line items. So we picked this one in the facilities, we've been talking about it for a few months now. And we just wanted to show, we've got an IT cost that has been growing quite dramatically over the last 5 years and is continuing to grow. We're also in the admin committee, I think this was something that we talked about as a council, a strategy meeting about looking at our procurement codes and things of that nature. So right now, IT and telecom is excluded from bid. And we've had some conversations with Douglas, and I think a lot of the stuff may have gone out for bid years and years and years ago, but hasn't since. So we've got a swell in our cost line that's continuing to swell. We've got 74 vendors providing, I think I did a count on that, I think I came up with about 74 across the board. We've got some big buckets that would be ripe for going out for bid. Just having some familiarity with this area of spend, it would appear to me that we are, let's just say we have probably significant opportunity to reduce our spend here or do something a little differently based on just benchmarking on telecom and IT services. So won't go any further tonight, but I think we're going to try to dive into it, and I'd like to get the council's support that on the procurement, which will probably be coming in the next couple of months, but to have IT, it was an exclusion. And I think that might have been okay when it was, under $50,000 a year, but it's heading towards $800,000, $900,000 a year, and I think we've got an opportunity, we shouldn't get this stuff out of the way. So, that's all for that.
As well as other items, like I think insurance and some other things, I
Insurance.
think, but yeah, all right. So you, no action?
No action, introduction.
All right. Next meeting is Tuesday, July 14th, 5 o'clock. No other business?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Off record at 6:50.
Mom's birthday.
Off record at 6:53.
Bring her.
It's also Bastille Day, I believe.
Not too bad.
Bring